In the vast expanse of the galaxy, the human race had once been a fledgling species, nestled on the far edges of known space. Now, they stood at the precipice of greatness, having risen from the ashes of 1,000 wars to become a unified force. Humanity was no longer a small, insignificant player in the galactic stage. They were now an empire in their own right, and their reach was vast. Yet, despite this newfound strength, the universe had always been a harsh and unforgiving place. For every step humanity had taken toward progress, another force had risen to challenge them. The old galactic empire, known as the Terran Dominion, had once ruled over vast stretches of the galaxy. But their grip on the stars had begun to loosen, and cracks began to form in the once unshakable foundation. Corruption, infighting, and the relentless thirst for power had weakened the Dominion from within. The High Lords and officials, more concerned with their personal ambitions than the greater good, had pushed the empire to the brink of collapse. Bureaucracy, inefficiency, and arrogance had become the hallmark of their rule. A once united galaxy was now fractured, with countless factions vying for control. At the heart of this chaos stood the people of Earth. No longer isolated and vulnerable, humanity had forged a new path, a path that would lead them not just to survival, but to a destiny that had once seemed impossible. Their uprising would not be about rebellion, it would be about revolution. It was time to take control not only of their own future, but of the galaxy itself. The first spark of revolution came in the form of the Phoenix Fleet, a fleet of warships that had once been part of the Terran Dominion. Under the leadership of General Alexei Voss, a brilliant and ruthless strategist, the fleet had defected from the collapsing empire. Voss had once been a loyal officer, but his disillusionment with the corruption at the heart of the Dominion had led him to defect. His fleet, now a ragtag group of renegades, was a symbol of humanity's determination to reclaim their destiny. The Phoenix Fleet operated in the shadows, striking at Dominion supply lines and infrastructure, sowing chaos across the galaxy. Their tactics were unorthodox, and they relied heavily on guerrilla warfare, making use of stealth technology, hacking, and asymmetric warfare. They were a thorn in the side of the Dominion, but they were far more than just a military force. They were the first true sign of humanity's defiance. Alexei Voss had gathered a crew of individuals from every corner of humanity's expanse. From the broken remnants of Earth's once divided nations to the sprawling colonies scattered across distant star systems, his fleet was a melting pot of humanity's finest and most desperate. Among them were skilled tacticians, brilliant engineers, former soldiers, and civilians who had been affected by the Empire's brutal reign. Voss, however, knew that the uprising would not be won through small strikes and sabotage alone. The galaxy was vast, and the Dominion was far too entrenched. What they needed was a symbol, a rallying point for the people. They needed something to unite the fractured human race. And that symbol would come from a place where humanity had first taken its steps into the stars, Earth. Earth had changed significantly in the centuries since humanity first ventured into space. Once a planet plagued by pollution, war, and inequality, it had undergone a transformation under the rule of the Dominion. The Terran Empire had rebuilt Earth, making it a shining example of their supposed greatness. Tall cities filled with gleaming skyscrapers covered the landscape, and the people lived under the control of the Empire's governing body. But beneath the surface, there was a simmering discontent, a realization that the Empire's promises were built on lies. It was in the heart of Earth's capital, New Geneva, that the revolution began. Lila Armstrong, a young and idealistic activist, had spent her life fighting against the Dominion's oppressive rule. She was the daughter of a well-known political dissident, and from a young age, she had been taught to challenge authority, to question the status quo. Lila had watched as the Dominion crushed any form of rebellion with brutal efficiency, and yet, she had also seen the growing number of defectors, those who had lost faith in the Empire and who now looked to the stars for hope. It was these people who had sparked something in her, who had reminded her of the power that still lay within the people of Earth. Lila had spent years organizing underground movements, reaching out to the scattered resistance cells that had begun to form. She knew that the key to overthrowing the Dominion lay not just in military might, but in uniting the people. Earth had the potential to become the heart of a galaxy-wide revolution, but it would take more than just weapons. It would take a collective will to challenge the very foundations of the Dominion's power. When Lila learned of the Phoenix Fleet, she saw an opportunity. The fleet had been making waves across the galaxy, and its leader, Alexei Voss, was a legend among the Resistance. If she could get the fleet to rally behind Earth's cause, they could become the spark that ignited the revolution. Lila's journey to meet Alexei was fraught with danger. She had to navigate the political landscape of a world on the brink of collapse, avoid Dominion spies, and build alliances with factions that had long been at odds. But her conviction was unwavering. She knew that the future of humanity and the galaxy rested on this one pivotal moment. The meeting between Lila Armstrong and General Alexei Voss was anything but conventional. It took place in the wreckage of a Dominion cruiser, a decaying relic that had been abandoned after a failed military campaign. It was in this stark, isolated location that the two figures met, and it would be here that the future of the galaxy was shaped. Lila arrived first, her ship hidden in the dark reaches of a distant asteroid field. The Phoenix Fleet had been waiting for her, their ships cloaked and concealed, operating from the shadows. When she boarded their flagship, the Phoenix, she was greeted by Voss himself, a towering figure with a cold, calculating gaze. He had the air of a man who had seen too much bloodshed, but still believed in something greater than himself. "You're late," Voss said with a sardonic smile as he motioned for her to sit. "The galaxy's waiting, and I'm starting to get impatient." Lila wasted no time with pleasantries. "The people of Earth are ready to fight. We can't do this alone. We need your fleet. We need the Phoenix." Voss studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "Earth's already a battleground. You think a few more ships are going to change anything?" "It's not just about ships," Lila replied, her voice steady. "It's about unity. The galaxy is fractured, but humanity has the power to lead. The Dominion is crumbling. We don't need to destroy them, we need to offer the galaxy something new. A new order. A new way forward." Voss sat back, his fingers steepled in front of his face. "A new order, huh? You think the galaxy is ready for that? After centuries of the Dominion's control, the people are loyal to them. They're afraid of change. And that's exactly why we have to act now," Lila said, leaning forward. "The people are scared, yes. But they're also tired. The Dominion's corruption is too deep. It's rotting from the inside out. What we offer them isn't just freedom from tyranny, it's a new chance to rebuild. To chart their own course." Voss's gaze softened, just a fraction. "I've fought for this moment for a long time. But I'm not in the business of offering hope. I'm in the business of winning." "We will win," Lila replied firmly. "Together, we can lead a united front. Earth will be the heart of this new order, and we will show the galaxy that unity, not division, is the future." After a long pause, Voss nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure the first shot we fire counts." With the alliance between Lila Armstrong and Alexei Voss sealed, the Phoenix Fleet began to rally the scattered forces of humanity. From the inner colonies to the outer rim, the uprising began to take form. Earth became the center of a vast resistance movement, uniting every human faction under one banner. The first phase of the uprising involved strategic strikes against the Dominion's infrastructure. The Phoenix Fleet, now bolstered by new ships and personnel from Earth, began to attack Dominion supply lines, communications networks, and key military installations. Each successful strike sent ripples through the Empire, undermining its grip on power and showing the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The Dominion, already weakened by years of corruption and civil unrest, responded with brutal force. Their fleets descended on the resistance, determined to crush the growing rebellion before it could gain any more momentum. The war for the future of the galaxy had begun, and every battle was more desperate than the last. However, the Phoenix Fleet's tactics proved to be effective. With stealth ships, advanced hacking technology, and guerrilla warfare strategies, they were able to hit the Dominion where it hurt the most: its supply chains, its leadership, and its moral authority. The Dominion's response was always heavy-handed, but it only fueled the fire of the Uprising. As the resistance gained ground, the Dominion's rulers, once seen as invincible, began to turn on one another. High lords vied for control, generals fought for power, and corruption ran rampant. The Emperor, once the undisputed leader of the galaxy, was reduced to a puppet on strings, his reign hanging by a thread. The final battle took place above the capital world of the Dominion, a planet called Viron, where the Emperor resided. The Phoenix fleet launched a full-scale assault on the planet's defenses, cutting through the remnants of the Dominion's fleet. It was a bloody, brutal conflict, one that saw countless lives lost, but it ended with the destruction of the Emperor's palace and the capture of the Dominion's leadership. As the last remnants of the Dominion's power crumbled, the galaxy stood on the brink of a new era. The people of Earth had risen, and the Phoenix fleet had led them to victory. But the real challenge had just begun. With the fall of the Dominion, the galaxy was left in a state of uncertainty. Former allies now turned enemies, worlds in chaos, and a power vacuum that threatened to consume everything. Lila Armstrong and Alexei Voss now found themselves in positions of leadership, but they knew that true peace could not be forged with the sword alone. They began the difficult task of rebuilding the galaxy. They formed a new council, one that represented every faction, every species, and every corner of the galaxy. This was not just humanity's uprising, it was the beginning of a new order, a galaxy united, no longer divided by war, fear, or corruption. The Phoenix fleet, once a symbol of rebellion, now became the backbone of the new government, ensuring that peace would be maintained and that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Under Lila and Voss's leadership, humanity and its allies set out to create a new legacy, the legacy of unity, hope, and a future where the galaxy could thrive without the shadow of tyranny looming over it. And so, the galaxy entered a new era, one defined not by the old order of empire and conquest, but by the principles of cooperation, justice, and the shared desire for a brighter future. Humanity's uprising had begun. And now, they would build the galaxy's new order. Chapter 8: The Fractured Galaxy. The ashes of the Dominion were still warm as the galaxy struggled to breathe in the aftermath of their fall. The planets, moons, and systems once bound by the iron-fisted control of the Terran Dominion now found themselves standing at the crossroads of their futures. For every liberated world, there were a dozen that feared the consequences of such radical change. Alliances forged through oppression were now strained by the uncertainty of a new, untested order. The newfound unity was fragile. Humanity, despite their victory, was still divided. On Earth, in the shadow of the newly formed Galactic Council, the powerful still vied for influence. The Resistance, while now a legitimate political force, was a mosaic of varying ideologies, some with their roots in rebellion, others in nationalism, and still others in pragmatism. Some of the colonies, especially those in the Outer Rim, eyed Earth's centralization with suspicion, fearing a new empire would rise from its ashes. Lila Armstrong and Alexei Voss had taken the helm, but they knew that their work was far from over. The dismantling of the Dominion had created a power vacuum, and that vacuum was always ripe for exploitation. Old enemies resurfaced, vying for the empty thrones, and new threats began to emerge, more dangerous than any of them had imagined. It wasn't long before the first major challenge to the new order arrived. From the dark reaches of the galaxy, a coalition of remnants from the Dominion, along with a number of rogue warlords, began to stir. Their purpose was clear: to reclaim the power that had once been theirs. The leader of this new faction was a former general of the Dominion, Jareth Folka. His reputation as a ruthless tactician and warlord was legendary, and he had managed to unite a coalition of disgruntled Dominion officers, mercenaries, and criminal syndicates. He had the military experience, the ambition, and the sheer charisma to lead an uprising against the fledgling government. Folka's forces had begun their campaign in the Outer Rim, quickly overtaking several weakly defended planets and systems. The once impressive fleet of the Dominion, now scattered and disorganized, was being reforged into a new weapon under Folka's command. He was methodical, precise, and calculating, qualities that had made him an enemy of the Phoenix fleet in the past. Lila knew that Folka's forces could not be ignored. If left unchecked, his growing army could destabilize the fragile coalition they had painstakingly built. She called for an emergency council meeting, summoning the representatives from every system, every faction, and every corner of the galaxy. "We can't afford to sit idly by," she said, standing at the head of the council chamber, her voice resonating through the crowd. "We've only just begun to rebuild, and already we face the threat of losing everything. Folka won't stop at the Outer Rim. He'll come for Earth, for every system we've liberated, and we will have no choice but to fight. But this time, we must be united more than ever before." Alexei Voss, his expression as hard as steel, added, "The Phoenix fleet is ready. We'll be able to slow his advance. But we need the Council to stand firm. This isn't a war for territory, it's a war for the soul of the galaxy." The Council was divided. Some representatives from the outer colonies saw the conflict differently. They didn't trust Earth's growing influence and were suspicious of Lila's leadership. They had fought for independence, and now they feared another centralized power. Some of the inner systems were more supportive, but they too were wary. How far would Earth go in exerting control over the galaxy? But despite the fears and doubts, the growing threat of Folka's forces united the Council in one important way. A decision was made: humanity, together, would face the challenge head-on. The Phoenix fleet would lead the charge, but the Council needed to form a coordinated military response, bringing together forces from across the galaxy to defend their shared future. Jareth Folka, despite his scattered forces, was a formidable foe. He understood the weaknesses of the New Order and was exploiting them with precision. His approach was tactical and psychological. He knew that the galaxy was still healing from the collapse of the Dominion and that fear and doubt would be his best weapons. He began his campaign by taking control of the smaller, less defensible systems. He seized planets that had only recently freed themselves from Dominion rule and spread his influence rapidly. Folka didn't simply conquer planets, he won hearts and minds. He promised the people power, stability, and prosperity, things that the new government, still in its infancy, could not yet provide. Folka's forces, once composed primarily of Dominion loyalists, now included mercenaries, bounty hunters, and criminals who saw him as a means to profit from the chaos. The warlords, once feuding among themselves, now rallied behind him as he positioned himself as the true heir to the Dominion's legacy, the legacy he had carefully spun into something appealing to the disillusioned and the power-hungry. He quickly gained control of several crucial trade routes, cutting off vital resources to the Council's forces. His strategy was simple: divide and conquer. By isolating the various factions of the galaxy, he could pick them off one by one, eroding the foundations of the new government. Despite the difficulties, the unified military forces, led by the Phoenix fleet, began to push back against Folka's incursions. But it was clear that this would not be an easy victory. Every engagement with his forces was costly, both in terms of lives lost and resources drained. The turning point in the war came at the Battle of Viron's Moon, a massive confrontation that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The Moon had long been a neutral ground, a place where galactic treaties and alliances had been signed. But now, it had become the staging ground for an all-out war between the Phoenix fleet and Folka's forces. The battle was fierce, with both sides losing ships and soldiers in a bloody clash that spanned the Moon's surface and the vastness of space. The Phoenix fleet, despite its superior tactics, was stretched thin. The Council's military assets had been divided, and not every system had contributed the support they had promised. But it was at this moment that Lila Armstrong and Alexei Voss realized the true scale of the challenge. Folka wasn't just fighting for power, he was fighting for control of the galaxy's heart. The Phoenix fleet, despite its victories, had to adapt. The old ways of war would not suffice. They needed something more. Lila, ever the visionary, reached out to the Council once more, urging them to do what they had not yet done: put aside their divisions and commit to a single, unified cause. This battle isn't just about military might, she told them. It's about our future. Folka represents everything we fought against: the old way of ruling with fear, control, and manipulation. We can't afford to repeat those mistakes. We have to show the galaxy that our strength lies in our unity, our diversity. Together, we're stronger than any single force. Alexei Voss agreed, his voice resolute. The Phoenix fleet can win battles, but only together can we win this war. As the battle raged, something remarkable happened. The various factions, once divided by centuries of conflict, began to set aside their differences. The Outer Rim colonies sent reinforcements to Viron's moon, and the inner systems coordinated their fleets for the first time. The Council's united front began to take shape. The Battle of Viron's moon ended in a hard-fought victory for the United Forces. Folka's coalition, though not entirely defeated, was pushed back significantly. His momentum had been halted, and his forces were in disarray. It was a decisive moment in the war, one that proved the galaxy could stand together, despite its divisions. But the battle was not the end of the struggle. The galaxy still had much to rebuild, and Folka remained a potent threat. However, the victory at Viron's moon proved that the new government, despite its flaws, had the potential to unite the galaxy against threats from within and beyond. Lila Armstrong and Alexei Voss stood together on the surface of the moon, looking up at the stars that had witnessed so much conflict. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since the fall of the Dominion, there was a glimmer of hope, a new dawn for the galaxy. "We've won the battle," Lila said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "But the real work begins now. We have to rebuild, not just our systems, but our hearts. The galaxy is watching, and we need to show them that unity is not just possible, it's inevitable." Voss nodded, his eyes reflecting the weight of the task ahead. "This is our chance, Lila. For humanity. For the galaxy. We can't afford to fail." And so, with the galaxy's new order beginning to take shape, the true work of forging peace, justice, and unity began. The struggle for the future of the galaxy was far from over, but humanity's uprising had begun, and the stars would never be the same again. Chapter 13: The Shadows of Power. Despite the hard-won victory at Viron's moon, the shadows of uncertainty still loomed over the galaxy. The battle had been decisive, but it had not broken Folka's resolve. Though his forces had been pushed back, he still commanded a formidable army, and his charisma continued to draw in disillusioned and desperate worlds under his banner. The Phoenix fleet, having decimated much of his forces, took the opportunity to regroup, but even as the Council celebrated their hard-earned success, Lila Armstrong and Alexei Voss knew that Folka's ideology had not been defeated. His vision of power, built on fear, dominance, and a return to the old ways, was seductive to many who had lived through the collapse of the Dominion. The battle for the future was not merely a war of armies, it was a war of ideas. Earth's influence was growing, but not all were content with this shift in power. A faction within the new galactic government, the Independent Coalition of the Rim, questioned the centralization of control on Earth. The outer colonies, which had long been neglected or oppressed by the Dominion, feared a new form of imperialism emerging from the center. While the more affluent inner systems rallied behind Lila and her vision of unity, there was unrest among the fringes. Folka knew this well. He understood the cracks in the new order and intended to exploit them. He began to spread his message of strength and self-determination, calling for the restoration of galactic pride, free from the overreach of Earth's influence. This message resonated with many, particularly on the frontier planets, where the memories of Dominion oppression were fresh, and the idea of independence was a powerful force. Lila was aware of the dangerous undercurrents. The galaxy was still very much in the process of healing, and the wounds of the Dominion's rule were deep. The uprising, though successful, had fractured society in ways that could not be easily repaired. The rebellion had started as a fight for freedom, but now it was a fight for governance. What shape would the new galaxy take? The conflict was no longer defined by large-scale battles. Instead, it was a quiet, insidious war of influence. Folka's propaganda machine began to spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Using the vast network of communication satellites and covert operatives, he created a narrative of resistance. He painted the Earth-based Council as a new authoritarian regime, seeking to control all aspects of life across the galaxy. The term the Earth Empire began to circulate, used both by his forces and sympathetic systems, furthering the fear that a new centralized power was rising in the heart of the galaxy. Folka's forces, now reorganized into a highly disciplined and effective military machine, conducted guerrilla operations and launched surprise attacks on critical infrastructure. They struck against civilian targets, fueling the fear that the Council's rule would lead to more instability and suffering. He aimed to fracture the fragile alliances among the newly unified systems, using fear as his weapon. The battle for hearts and minds intensified. Earth, despite its technological and military superiority, struggled to maintain its legitimacy in the eyes of the galaxy. Every time a bomb exploded in one of the Council's allied planets, every time a colony was attacked or a world fell into chaos, Folka's influence grew. Meanwhile, Alexei Voss, ever the strategist, began to understand that the fight would not be won on the battlefield alone. The galaxy was at a crossroads. Each system had its own aspirations, its own vision for the future. The fight for a united galaxy wasn't just about military victory, it was about a collective vision. Without a clear, shared sense of purpose, the alliance that had formed against the Dominion would shatter under the weight of its contradictions. "I can win battles, Lila," Alexei told her, his face etched with the lines of war. "But I can't win a galaxy. Not without something more." Lila nodded gravely. "We need a new vision, one that speaks to the heart of what we're fighting for. Unity, yes. But also freedom. The right to self-determination. We can't be a new empire, Alexei. We need to be something different. We need to give the people something to believe in, something they can fight for without fear of oppression." On the fringes of the galaxy, an unexpected alliance was forming. Among the chaos, former leaders of the Dominion had begun to splinter from Folka's command. There were the military elite, the bureaucrats, the diplomats who had once been high-ranking members of the Terran government, but who had seen their world crumble under Folka's vision of conquest. One of the most influential figures to defect was Admiral Silas Kor, a veteran of the Dominion's long wars. Kor had risen through the ranks, earning a reputation for being a brilliant tactician and a master of fleet management. But Kor had never agreed with the violent methods Folka used to consolidate power. He had seen firsthand the damage Folka's ambition had caused, and he knew the galaxy needed a different path forward. Kor, along with several former Dominion officers, began to secretly meet with representatives from the Council, including Lila and Alexei. He brought with him valuable intelligence about Folka's forces and weaknesses, but he also offered a deeper understanding of the motivations behind his former leader's rise to power. "He doesn't just want to rule," Kor explained in one of their clandestine meetings. "He wants to bring back the old order, the system where the galaxy was ruled by the strong, and everyone else was subjugated. Folka's vision isn't a new one, it's an ancient one. The same one the Dominion was built on. And it will lead to nothing but endless war." Lila, listening intently, exchanged glances with Alexei. She had heard similar ideas from the people who had supported the resistance, people who had lived under the Dominion's heel, who knew what the Empire's return would mean. "We're not trying to build an empire, Silas," Lila replied softly. "We're building a new order, one that's based on cooperation. The old ways are dead. We have to show the galaxy that we've learned from those mistakes," Alexei added. "That we understand the cost of the old system." The Council knew that to maintain its legitimacy and avoid falling into the same traps that had ensnared the Dominion, they would need to redefine the very concept of galactic leadership. The Earth-based government, though formed from the ideals of unity and justice, had the appearance of centralization. It was vulnerable to accusations of empire building, and Folka's propaganda had exploited that fear with ruthless efficiency. In response to the growing tensions, Lila called for a historic summit, the Conference of Reconciliation. The conference was meant to take place on the neutral world of Avaris, a planet known for its rich history of diplomacy and peaceful coexistence among the galaxy's many species. The goal was to create a new framework for galactic governance, one that would maintain the Council's unity, but also respect the sovereignty and self-determination of individual systems. The conference would be a forum for debate and negotiation, and the hope was that it would present a solution to the political divisions that had emerged since the fall of the Dominion. Representatives from every faction, from Earth to the Outer Rim, would be present. But it was clear from the outset that the conference would be fraught with tension. Folka's coalition was a growing threat, and his supporters had made it known that they would be attending as well, demanding to have their voice heard. As the conference convened, Lila stood before the assembly, the weight of the galaxy's future heavy on her shoulders. Alexei stood beside her, a quiet strength in the storm. "We stand at a crossroads," Lila began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. "We've fought together to overthrow the Dominion. But now, we must fight for something more. We must fight for a galaxy where each world, each people, can determine their own fate. We must rebuild, not just the systems of power, but the very idea of what it means to live in a united galaxy." The room was filled with murmurs of agreement, but also dissent. Systems that had once been oppressed under the Dominion's rule were wary of Earth's growing influence. Folka's supporters, meanwhile, made their presence felt with their demands for greater autonomy and a return to the power structures of the past. The debate raged for days, with factions clashing over every issue. But through it all, Lila remained steadfast, urging compromise and cooperation. She knew that this conference was the only chance to preserve the fragile unity they had fought so hard for. As the days passed, something extraordinary began to happen. Slowly, the representatives, despite their differences, began to find common ground. The galaxy was scarred, but it had the potential to heal. The realization grew that the past could not be rewritten, but the future could still be shaped. In the final days of the summit, a resolution was reached: a new governing body, the Galactic Coalition, would be established. It would be a federation of systems, each with their own governance, but united in the principles of democracy, cooperation, and mutual respect. The Earth Council would remain as the central authority, but only as a facilitator of dialogue and cooperation, not as an authoritarian ruler. Every system, regardless of its size or power, would have a voice. Folka's forces were still a threat, but the creation of the Galactic Coalition marked a new chapter in the galaxy's history. The path forward would not be easy, but it was a path defined by unity, a shared commitment to the future, and the belief that the galaxy could build a new order, one that was not based on fear or conquest, but on understanding and cooperation. As Lila and Alexei left the conference chamber, they knew that the true work had only just begun. The galaxy was on the brink of something new, a new dawn where humanity's uprising had not only won the war but had planted the seeds for a lasting peace. And as the stars above Avarice glittered like distant promises, the future of the galaxy lay in their hands.